If it's one thing A24 Movie Studios does right, is that they give their filmmakers creative freedom to make the films that they want, and it usually ends up being fantastic, engaging, and innovative. Does A24's latest release, Love, Lies, and Bleeding, fit into any of those categories? Maybe. So let's talk about it.
Excitement in the air is palpable. The atmosphere is electric. A celebration of history in the making.
What is this place? You're looking pretty good in there. There's some pretty serious lines going. Yeah? Why don't you want me working for your dad? Oh, he's a psycho.
Okay, it is your boy T with another Have You Seen That with T movie review. And before we jump into reviewing A24's latest foray, go ahead and hit that like and subscribe button to show support for the channel if you enjoy the content on the channel. But back to the review of Love, Lies, and Bleeding. The film centers around Lou, played by Kristen Stewart, and Jackie in a career-defining role spectacularly played by Katie O'Brien, are two women who are both deeply flawed yet find a way to fall in love over what seems to be only a few days or weeks, not exactly sure. As Jackie passes into town on her way to Vegas to enter and win a bodybuilding competition. But Lou's sister and brother-in-law, played by Jenna Malone and Dave Franco, on one of the most trailer park 80s mullets that I've ever seen, to grace the screen, along with Ed Harris as Lou's father, bring major issues into their lives and relationships. And this is also a PSA on the dangers of steroid use. And speaking of steroid use, let's go ahead and do a quick story time with T, because as I was watching this film, there is, of course, in the world of bodybuilding, there's steroids, right? We get the steroids. It's a little bit prevalent everywhere. It was very prevalent in the 80s and 90s, which kind of made me have a flashback of a very special episode or one of those ABC after-school specials of this high school kid who played on this football team and he took steroids. And all I remember as a kid is watching this after school special and seeing this kid take steroids, and he went into quote unquote roid rage. And I remember there was a scene where he was on a date with his girlfriend and they were back in his home. They were back in his house and she didn't want to give him any. And he just threw her around, and that was like the final straw in this after school special. So as I was thinking of this, as I was watching the film, and I thought of this as I was putting together my notes, the video, I YouTubed after school special steroids. And what I found was Ben Affleck in 1994 did this after-school special. It wasn't an ABC thing, but it was actually on HBO, and that was what I remember. It was at HBO. They had these like public service announcement type movies where it was one about suicide, it was one about drugs, and this one was about steroids. And it was a young Ben Affleck in 1993-94 playing this high school student who had to get bigger, stronger, faster. And that has nothing to do with Love, Lies, and Bleeding, but I just thought it was fascinating that I found this old clip of this old movie that I remember from my childhood. But back to the review. The highlights. One of the highlights is the 80s aesthetic of this rustic New Mexico town, just really feeling like a place where one could get trapped in and really not find any semblance of happiness other than someone new coming into town and upending that status quo. I felt the town and the look of the film as much as the character in the film as the actual characters in the movie. The small town and that desert backdrop, along with the wonderful camera work, really made the world feel lived in, yet desolate and decrepit all at the same time. Another highlight was the cast. This cast was fantastic. Ed Harris, who is one of the most underrated actor, was an absolute menace anytime he was on the screen. He had this thing about him that just worked on every single level. And Dave Franco channeled his inner James Franco to play that creepy brother-in-law to perfection. And then there was Katie O'Brien. She was the center of the movie, even though Kristen Stewart was the star, or at least supposed to be the star. Katie just looked like the star, and she played this unhinged character to perfection. I mean, this girl was so deeply flawed and so deeply imperfect that watching Katie O'Brien on the screen was just perfect. And there was so many times in the film where I just wanted to yell at her because she was just making these bonehead and just dumb decisions. And that's how you can tell an actor's doing a wonderful job, when they elicit emotions from the audience. And they had definitely elicited a lot of emotions from me because I was getting very frustrated with some of the things that they were doing, but it made the movie just move forward as best as possible. And another thing, as I was watching this film, all I could think of was just Katie O'Brien playing Abby in the next season of Last of Us. I know Abby's been cast already, but man, she would be fantastic, and she just looks the part because she was buff, just beyond buff in this film. I don't remember seeing her in anything else. I saw that she played in The Mandalorian, but I haven't watched the last 2 seasons of The Mandalorian, so maybe she's in those seasons. Or maybe she just doesn't look that big in The Mandalorian, so I don't remember her from that series. She was just fantastic in this film. Another highlight is just A24 and their track record for putting together and putting out creative and quality films. This studio has produced some of the most iconic horror and just plain old zany and wacky films in the last few decades. The story is a very familiar one, but it takes turns in the creative direction midway in the film, and it moves from a romantic drama into this horror thriller filled with blood and gore, and there was a lot of blood and gore. It's not a turn that I saw coming because of the pacing of the movie. It just comes almost out of nowhere. When it happens, it just works because of the direction and the stellar cast and the cinematography. And the cinematography of this film was fantastic. Let's talk about the lowlights. The lowlight of the movie to me was just the sheer ridiculousness of the plot and just coincidences and random events that just bring everybody together. They were making these just brain-numbing decisions and choices throughout the film. And I understand people are human. People make dumb decisions every day. But it just was just over the top for me. And I feel like there was a missed opportunity with diving deep into Jackie's backstory. There was a small portion of the movie. It was probably about 2 or 3 minutes that kind of gave us a glimpse of how dark her character's past was and what led her to do what she did in this film. But it just didn't dive enough into that. I felt like it could have given us a good another 10 or 15 minutes of that. And one good thing about the movie is it had a runtime of 1 hour 44 minutes. So it was tad under 2 hours, which is fantastic. They didn't overstay their welcome, but at the same time, I wanted to know more. I wanted to see more before that incredible and wacky ending. Another lowlight for me was Kristen Stewart. Her character was fine, but just her on the screen, I don't know what it is about her face in this movie, but I guess she looked the part, but I just wasn't feeling it. Everyone else felt like they were given everything they had, and she just felt like she was phoning it in. It could just be me, and I'm not one of those Twilight haters. I'm not one of those people. I think she's a fantastic actress. In this movie, it was just part of me that felt like she wasn't invested in this film, and I could be totally wrong, and maybe that was just her character. But it just rubbed me a little wrong, and that's one of my lowlights. I think everyone else was fantastic, but just her in this role just didn't do it for me. And lastly, who is this movie made for? This movie is made for anyone who is a fan of A24. If you enjoy A24's creativity and mind-bending style of movies, then you're definitely going to enjoy this movie thoroughly. But you have to go into this film with an open mind and leave all your biases at the door, because it is a romantic drama involving 2 women in which they don't hypersexualize their relationship to the point of like it being poppy and just bubbly. But there is quite a bit of sex in it, and there's quite a bit of violence in this movie. So it is gory, it is a thriller, it is intense, but it's definitely enjoyable. If you've watched any A24 movie, you kind of already know what you're getting yourself into. You're getting yourself into a great time, and I love just the creative direction that this director goes in and the creative director this plot takes us in, because it is a very familiar formula for a movie, but they, instead of going left, they just veer right, and it is fantastic. This movie ends on a very bombastic note. It's insane, but that's A24. You kind of get what you get with A24, and generally it's fantastic. Generally it works well, and in this case I thought it worked well. It was a very interesting movie. I left the movie theater with questions, which is fantastic. I didn't leave the movie theater angry. I left the movie theater inquisitive, wondering what's next for the characters in this film. And that's a good thing. That's a great thing. But definitely, have you seen Lives, Loves, and Bleeding? Have you seen Lives, Love, and Bleeding? Love, Lies, and Bleeding? Have you seen it? Did you like it? What did you think? Go ahead, drop a comment down below right after you like and subscribe to the Have You Seen That with T YouTube page. And until next time, I'll check you later.